signs everywhere in Taiwan of the close ties with the United States. But the start of the Trump era has many here asking if they are still on the same side.
Traditionally, Taiwan is relying on the big brother, U.S. But now we can trust that we can rely on Trump.
What Trump has said and will do will have a bigger impact on business. It may have limited effect on our daily lives.
But the fear is what could happen when Trump turns his attentions to China. Relations are still reeling from his phone call with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, and the suggestion he might give Taiwan greater recognition. If he does, analysts believe Taiwan could suffer.
China could direct its attention to Taiwan by means of or diplomatic offenses or even military threat and economic sanctions.
And then there's Trump's promise of higher tariffs on Chinese goods to the US. That could hurt Taiwanese companies who have factories in mainland China. James Hsu's company would avoid them because his factory, making gardening tools for export, including the American market, is in Vietnam. And the Taiwan government is encouraging more companies to move their factories to other parts of Asia to reduce reliance on mainland China.
This could be an opportunity for change, for companies looking at moving factories away from mainland China. It could give them the push they need.
Taiwan could be hurt in a trade war, but it could also lose out if the US and China reach a new trade agreement. There's a suspicion that Trump, as the self-styled super deal maker, might use Taiwan as a bargaining chip.
Between the ambitions of the new US administration and its objectives for renegotiating all sorts of deals with China, and Taiwan being stuck in the middle as a sort of useful pawn.
In the US-China diplomacy game, it seems clear Trump is putting the interests of the US and himself as equal firsts. Whether Taiwan will benefit from that appears to be more a matter of chance, over which it has diminishing control.
This is a production line of an Iranian brand new anti-smoking medicine, generally known as varenicline. Varenicline is one of the most common prescriptions for smokers around the world who want to quit nicotine addiction. Now, the new achievement in Iran is unprecedented, since Iranian physicians say it broke the U.S. monopoly on quit smoking drugs.
Now, with our own domestically made medicine, there is no need to import American ones. This will boost the drug's accessibility for Iranian patients, and its price is 1/3 of its American peer.
Statistics show that there are around 1 billion smokers worldwide. According to polls, 2 out of every 3 smokers want to stop smoking. But as doctors point out, the main reason why so few succeed is because nicotine addiction is strong and difficult to break. Now, varenicline reduces cravings for cigarettes and decreases the pleasurable effects of all kinds of tobacco products. But as Iranian physicians say, a little patience is needed.
8 days after taking the medicine, the smokers start to feel its effects, but it takes patients 6 to 10 weeks to begin to feel that they are disinclined toward smoking.
In recent years, Iran has made significant advances in its pharmaceutical sector. Last year, it added 100 new items to the list of its indigenous pharmaceuticals. The unveiling of this Iranian homemade medicine comes as the new U.S. administration has set in motion a new wave of sanctions targeting Iran's medical sector. The move has drawn stern reactions from many Iranian officials, with some of them denouncing the new sanctions as inhumane. Last week, the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, shortly known as OFAC, expanded a list of medical equipment that need authorization to be sold to Iranian customers. This will complicate the process of importing certain medical equipment with diagnostic and treatment applications. Iran's deputy health minister says extending the list shows Trump's hostility towards the Iranian nation.
The U.S. decision is against humanity. Patients shouldn't fall victim to any political hostility. But I assure my nation that we in the health ministry will definitely find new ways to provide the necessary medicine.
Such limitations on Iran's medical industry are not new. Before the implementation of the nuclear deal in 2016, the U.S. banned many life-saving medications, including chemotherapy drugs for cancer patients. But Iranian health officials say restrictions will only make Iran stronger and increasingly self-sufficient, as the past has proved. Youssef Jalali, Press TV, Tehran.
Well, Greg Karlstrom has more on the controversial bill passed by Israel's parliament.
Right-wing Israeli lawmakers were exuberant about this bill. They described it as a first step towards possibly annexing a large chunk of the occupied West Bank, which would obviously preclude any chance of creating a Palestinian state. The vote in the Knesset on Monday night largely fell along party lines. We heard from opposition lawmakers warning that this would lead to war crimes prosecutions. Isaac Herzog, the opposition leader, in fact, saying this would end with Israeli politicians hauled before the International Criminal Court at The Hague. This law likely to face an immediate challenge in Israeli courts. And we've already heard from the Attorney General, who has said he thinks it's probably unconstitutional and he's going to have a very hard time defending it if it is taken to court. So there is a chance this bill may be struck down before it really takes effect in Israel. Of course, it will be a topic of conversation next week when Prime Minister Netanyahu flies to Washington to meet with President Trump in the White House. This is a bill that has met with widespread condemnation from the international community. Last year in December, when it passed the first reading in the Knesset, it was condemned by the US, the EU, the UN, just about every world body and foreign country. But the White House last night, when asked to comment on the Knesset vote, declined to comment. They said we're going to withhold judgment on this bill until President Trump has had a chance to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So certainly a sign that there is a new era in U.S.-Israeli relations with a change of power in Washington.
Demonstrations have convinced the Romanian government to back off a controversial corruption law, but protesters aren't satisfied yet. The new law passed last week would have decriminalized certain acts of corruption. Critics said the law went against Romania's ongoing anti-corruption effort. Romania is the second poorest country in the European Union, thanks in part to decades of endemic corruption. Romania's government has now repealed the law, but that hasn't stopped protesters from flooding Victory Square in central Bucharest, along with other cities in Romania and around Europe. With the law undone, protesters are now calling for the resignation of the government, which only took office in December.
Demonstrators gathered outside Downing Street on Monday to show their outrage over Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to London for talks with his British counterpart Theresa May. Zionists staged a counter-demo, but were drowned out by the stronger pro-Palestine presence. Protesters argue that the UK government should not welcome nor host Benjamin Netanyahu while he continues to violate international law and is complicit in crimes against the Palestinian people.
Theresa May signed UN Resolution 2334 in December. That defined settlement building as illegal and as an obstacle to peace. And Benjamin Netanyahu, in response to that, has effectively put up two fingers to the world and said he's going to build 6,000 more settlements. So she should be saying to him that's unacceptable. And what we ask her to do is stop talking about settlements as illegal, start treating them as illegal, and ban the import of all settlement goods into the UK.
During his talks with May, Netanyahu made an effort to divert international attention from the Israeli crimes and violations. He raised the issue of Iran's recent missile test, claiming it poses a threat to Europe. Netanyahu wants Britain to join the US to impose new sanctions against Iran. This while Iran has repeatedly said its missiles are only defensive and will not ask for permission to improve them. With new faces in power in both the US and the UK, many believe that Netanyahu is trying to reinforce these nations' close relationship with Israel.
War is in the air, at least according to recent press headlines, indicating that Iran and the US are on the verge of conflict. And the Trump administration's ever-hostile rhetoric towards Tehran seems to show the speculation isn't necessarily groundless either.
They have total disregard for our country. They're the #1 terrorist state. They're sending money all over the place and weapons.
President Trump has severely criticized the various agreements reached between Iran and the Obama administration, as well as the United Nations, as being weak and ineffective. Instead of being thankful to the United States in these agreements, Iran is now feeling emboldened.
As far as Iran goes, this is the single biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
However, both sides were filled with optimism when that historic nuclear deal was agreed just back in 2015.
Today, the United States, together with our allies and partners, has reached a historic understanding with Iran.
Russia's historically been an ally of Iran and played a defining role in reaching that agreement, which was praised by former US leader Barack Obama. But with tensions between America and Iran again on the rise, cooperation between all three countries now seems near impossible. Media reports also suggest the Trump administration will look to drive a wedge between Russia and Iran to force Moscow into Washington's camp. If you take a look at the map, it shows few countries remain indifferent anyway to Iran. You've got China, Syria, Lebanon and Venezuela. They're seen as its partners, where on the other hand, countries like Canada, Israel and Saudi Arabia are expected to back up Washington's stance against Iran. We spoke to political analysts who say Iran does play a key role in international relations, and any escalation involving it would result in serious global repercussions.
Iranian allies in the region, from Iraq to Syria and many others, would target the United States' interests, including 36 bases. And the United States knows that Iran is not Afghanistan, Iran is not Iraq. It enjoys a very strong ballistic missile capability as well as drones, very high-tech products in various areas of military industries that could trouble the United States and could devastate the U.S. interests as well as Israel and other interests that they have in the region.
It doesn't seem realistic to me that that Russia would significantly shift from its alliance with Iran, for example, on Syria. Why would Russia, which has largely achieved its objectives in Syria, the U.S. now largely marginalized, I would expect China to push back very strongly on any U.S. attempt to hit them with unilateral sanctions with respect to Iran, particularly because, it's not like Trump administration is being that nice to China. So why shouldn't China push back?
The President's executive orders on border security and immigration enforcement will enhance public safety for all of our citizens. The President's recent executive order to temporarily suspend entry for foreign nationals from 7 countries we believe is lawful and constitutional, and the review ordered by the President is necessary and appropriate. It will enable us to assess the adequacy and availability of information we need from all countries to adjudicate all visa applications or other benefits under our existing immigration laws, and to determine if the person seeking the benefit is, in fact, who they say they are and would not present us a threat. While some of the core tenets of this order are the subject of ongoing litigation, it is my belief that we will prevail and be able to take the steps necessary to protect our nation.
Let me say first, I agree with the policy of the executive order. It's consistent with a memo I drafted with to then candidate Trump, with Mayor Giuliani, Attorney General Mukasey, advocating a shift from a Muslim ban, which he was campaigning on, which we thought was unconstitutional, to rather an enhanced vetting process of immigrants and refugees based on risk, not religion, from high-threat areas. It's consistent with the visa waiver security bill that was signed into law by President Obama. It's consistent with the SAFE Act that passed the House with bipartisan, veto-proof majority. My concern, as you and I have talked, is how it was implemented in the execution of this order. First, lawful permanent residents with green cards were denied. Military advisors who risked their lives to help U.S. forces overseas, as you know, were denied. And students were trapped overseas with visas. Let me say I applaud you for quickly correcting what I consider to be errors by quickly granting the exception and waiver to green card holders, which went a long way to remedy, I think, this executive order.